All right, and hello everyone. I love seeing where everyone is joining from today. I saw a few people from Michigan enjoying our snowy weather. I know we got 3 inches here in Marshall last night, but that's okay. We're heading into December. I guess we should expect it this time of year. So thank you for joining me here today. We're going to learn a little bit about intergenerational storytelling, and we're going to talk about how we can foster connections in our communities and within our own families through story-based activities. So before we get started, I just wanted to let you know a little bit about me and my background. As Allison said, my name's Chelsea Johnson, and I'm a librarian here in Marshall. I've been working with local history and genealogy resources for about 10 years now. And while I typically work with adults, I'm always looking for new ways to bring family history to younger audiences. So I'm really interested in this topic in intergenerational family history and storytelling. Let's see. So let's get started. Before we explore some of the options for storytelling activities, I'm going to talk a little bit about why storytelling is so important for all minds of all types, developing and adult. And I put an asterisk here after developing because, of course, our minds are always developing. But for the purposes of this presentation, I'm using these terms as a way to differentiate between infant, toddler, and adolescent minds and adult minds. After talking about why we should be invested in storytelling across all ages, I'm going to give some tips for how to tell a good story in a way that's going to be the most effective, keeping in mind all of those ways that storytelling benefits us. Then we're going to dive into some ideas for activities that involve storytelling across generations. So I really love this quote from the author Ursula K. Le Guin about how fundamental storytelling is to us as humans, and I thought it was going to be an apt one to include in the program. There have been great societies that did not use the wheel, but there have been no societies that did not tell stories. So there's clearly something inherently valuable about storytelling that makes it a key feature of the human experience, no matter the time or the place. So let's talk a bit about how storytelling helps us as we develop. Now, I know a bit about family history and storytelling, but I'm definitely not a neuroscientist. So the handout and at the end of the presentation, there's going to be a list of some of the resources that I consulted for this information. Listening to and telling stories helps developing brains in a number of different ways. So in a literal physical sense, storytelling promotes brain development by helping to organize neural networks. Stories can do this by offering two different types of information for the brain to process: events, which are going to be tied to a period of time, and emotions, which give the story significance. So when you're storytelling with children, it's really important to try to include not only facts and locational information, but also information about thoughts and feelings. Storytelling helps young participants place themselves within a larger social and familial context. Stories can give children a sense of place in their communities and within their own family's timeline. So hearing parents or grandparents talk about their experiences growing up or their own family dynamics is going to not only tell children about their relatives, but it also positions them within the family structure. So for instance, my nephew, who's 5 years old, he used to really focus on stories about and pictures of my brother and I when we were children, and he would emphasize repeatedly that we were siblings. Our family stories about growing up together were helping him establish family connections, and they were helping him understand his own position, that he was a son and a nephew, that he might have his own sibling one day, and what those things mean. So when telling intergenerational family stories, this context can help children develop their own sense of identity. And building a sense of identity can benefit a child's self-esteem, their sense of belonging, and this is going to promote emotional resiliency. Stories encourage self-reflection in listeners and in tellers. So by hearing about others' experiences, emotions, and behaviors, children are given a mental template for how to view themselves and their own experiences. Storytelling also helps children learn to make predictions, which is going to allow them to prepare mentally and emotionally in their own lives. And also importantly, storytelling helps developing minds learn how to organize and process complex thoughts and feelings. So, this is one of the reasons why it's so crucial to share sad or difficult stories as well as happy ones. By hearing how others have responded to adversity or tragedy, children will learn coping strategies for how to regulate their own emotions and respond in a healthy and appropriate way. Studies have shown that children whose parents discuss negative emotions and how to handle them have better social and academic skills. And separate studies show that family storytelling results in children with lower anxiety and fewer behavioral issues. Aside from the positive impact on their own thoughts and feelings, children who engage in family storytelling also show a better understanding of their peers' feelings, which has long-term social benefits. I think it's also really important to note here that storytelling can also serve as a substitute for reading to children in families where the parents are not readers or where they cannot read. So reading to children has innumerable benefits, and of course is highly encouraged, especially in conjunction with storytelling. But storytelling alone can greatly benefit children in many of the same ways. So what about the effects of storytelling on adult minds? Well, much like with youth, storytelling encourages the formation and maintenance of neural pathways, and it can help with cognitive function. It also helps build relationships and a sense of belonging. When people share stories and they envision someone else's experiences, their brainwaves will literally sync with the person telling the story. So sharing stories can help adults process their life events and their place in their own families and communities. One of the ways that we build and maintain our individual personalities is by recounting and re-emphasizing our personal traits, our goals, and our values. Storytelling can help adults continue to develop and maintain this sense of identity by preventing something that's known as narrative foreclosure. So narrative foreclosure happens when people begin to believe that they've stopped developing, that they won't have any new experiences, essentially that their stories are complete. Storytelling really encourages us to continue developing our life story. Retelling and reprocessing stories with another person can also help adults continue to develop and grow as we reflect on and possibly reconsider our past feelings and behaviors. One of the storytelling techniques that we're going to discuss is about including the perspective of several different characters in the story. And in adults, doing this can really encourage a deeper understanding of past experiences and provide more opportunities for growth. And significantly, adults who engage in storytelling also tend to have better memories and be happier overall. So while we might think about storytelling often as being really beneficial for the developing minds involved, it's important to remember that it also has lots of positive impacts on our adult minds. So how do you tell a good story, keeping in mind all of the ways that it can benefit those involved? Well, you want to start off by being excited and smiling. Like with any conversation that we have with others, you want to engage your listener and you want to be approachable. Don't be afraid to practice your story or elements of your story if you know that it's something that you're going to be telling. This is going to give you a chance to revisit and reprocess the events, which is good for our adult brains. And it also helps ensure that you're going to tell the story the way that you want to tell it. This next one isn't a hard and fast rule, but generally you'll want to aim for a concise story, especially if you have a younger listener whose attention span might be a bit shorter than an adult's. Make sure that you use lots of details to help your listener envision what's happening, which is going to stimulate different areas of the brain. And really try to tap into the emotions of the story and approach it from multiple character viewpoints. This is going to create connection and help listeners imagine how others feel and how they themselves would respond to a situation. And don't fall into the trap of thinking that your own story isn't interesting. If you seem bored with your story, other people are going to be bored too. Got a couple more here, 2-slide one. So also tailor your story to the life stages of the listeners, especially if you're telling stories to young children. But this is also going to be applicable to adults and teens who might find solutions to their current problems in your story. You're going to want to show a situation from multiple angles, which is going to help listeners consider different perspectives. And it can help adults frame old narratives in new ways, which is going to promote growth. Don't let storytelling become an event that only gets pulled out at the holidays or family reunions. You want to make storytelling a continuous part of your family life, and that's going to encourage children and adults to routinely process and consider their experiences. Try to involve your listener. You can do this by soliciting feedback or asking questions, and it's a great way to boost engagement. Also, avoid making assumptions about what listeners are going to want to hear or how they're going to react to a story based on their age. Don't close conversations down before they even have a chance to start. And finally, remember that kids can tell when you've sanitized a story. Now, this doesn't mean that you should jump right into telling children age-inappropriate stories, but if you're avoiding mentioning things that you find difficult to talk about or uncomfortable, just know that they're going to notice that. And remember that kids and teens are learning to address those mature, difficult, or scary topics through stories like these. Stories are a safe place for them to explore their own feelings about topics like death, loss, sometimes before they encounter those things in their own lives. And remember, even if you don't feel like you're the best storyteller or like you don't have the best story to tell, it's still better than staying silent. It's not a story or the story that matters. It's that the family tells stories. Okay, so now let's get talking about some activities. Many of these activities are going to be framed surrounding like family events and as family activities, but keep in mind that they can all be adapted to work for friend groups or for community settings as well. So some quick tips for success when you're planning some of these activities. Remember that all of the participants are going to be different. They're going to have different interests, they're going to have different attention spans, and they're going to have different engagement needs. So if one activity doesn't seem to be getting much positive feedback, don't despair, just try another one. That might work a little bit better for the people that are involved in your activity. This one is so important, the second one, that I'm including it twice in this presentation. Don't make assumptions about participants based on their ages. Let them express themselves and their own interests unimpeded. When you're hosting intergenerational storytelling activities, it's important that you encourage connections across different ages. And one way to do that is going to be by finding similarities in experiences and in these memories and stories. These activities are going to offer lots of ways to compare those experiences. And finally, for each activity, take the time to talk about the memories and discuss how they vary from family member to family member. This is going to help emphasize the different perspectives that are so important to storytelling, and it will help young listeners consider the thoughts, feelings, and experiences of others. So first up is a classic, creating a family timeline. So I don't know about all of you, but I certainly had to do my fair share of timelines in grade school. And this is going to be no different really, except that it's going to help build family stories. So for this activity, you're just going to need a large sheet of paper, something to write with, and a ruler, although that's really optional. You can also include things like photographs, or you can encourage participants to draw their own pictures. So you're going to work together to pick 10 to 20 events, depending on how large you want your timeline to be, that you're going to add to that family timeline together. Make sure that everyone that's participating gets a chance to pick. And as you select events, talk about why they're important to the family story. Make sure to ask the people that are selecting those events why they selected what they did, and see if your recollections of each event match, and maybe talk about how they're different. Another great one, this is a personal favorite of mine, making family recipes together. So many of us have family favorites that we associate with the holidays or with our big family get togethers. But have you ever made those recipes with the younger members of your family? Talk about what foods and meals each of you associate with the family, and have a night where you make one or more, depending on how much time you have, of those recipes together. Talk about where the recipes came from, who usually makes it, and when you have shared those dishes together. You can talk about if there are different variations on the recipe. Maybe somebody likes their stuffing with raisins in it and somebody doesn't. Is the food from a certain country or a region that the family has ties to? And what kind of family storytelling and memories can you draw from that? And then enjoy your meal and share stories while you eat. Another fun activity is a family memories field trip. So the image here is of someone in a car, but this could also be done by bus, by train, or just by simply walking around the old neighborhood. So I've actually done this one a few years ago with my dad and my brother. We all piled into my car and we headed to Detroit to drive around my dad's old stomping grounds. My brother and I ended up learning a lot about his childhood, and he got the opportunity to see some places that he hadn't visited in decades. If you're planning to record the stories during this trip, bring a notebook and something to write with, a camera so that you can take photos of those old places, and something to record the audio. It's really hard to catch everything just by writing when you're moving in a car. So a recording can take some of the pressure off and let everyone just focus on the stories. And then later you can look through what you wrote down, the photographs, and piece things together with the audio. While you take your field trip, tell stories about your time in that place, about how it's changed over time, about whether seeing those places again sparks any memories or emotions. And if multiple family members have memories of that same place, how do they compare? A day in the life is an activity that actually is for me during an encounter a couple of years ago. I was at a restaurant and I saw a child, toddler age, who was wandering around with a little camera. It was clearly made for small children. It was all rubberized, so he could really bash it around, uh, as tends to happen with kids. I mentioned to my father to the father that it seemed like a neat idea, and he commented that it was really fascinating to see what he ended up choosing to take photos of. So for a day in the life, you'll choose a length of time, a day, a week, whatever you want, and have each participant carry a camera with them and take photos of whatever sparks their interest. At the end of that time, get together and just share your photos. You can talk about what you chose to photograph and why, and you can tell stories about the context behind those photos. Participants might find that similar things interest them, or they might learn new things about what their family members like. This can be an especially good activity for children who aren't quite able to tell their own stories yet, or might need a little bit of prompting. It's also good for teens and adolescents who might feel more comfortable sharing a picture than sharing a story. So this is a good one for this time of year, heading into the holiday seasons. If you're celebrating a holiday or any special event really as a family, you can make decorations that incorporate family stories and memories. So this can involve making your own decorations and then sharing whatever inspired you to do that. Or you can do things like writing out stories or thoughts and putting it on paper, and then putting those papers into the decorations, and even sharing those memories as a group later. So materials for this exercise are going to vary wildly, depending on what type of holiday you're celebrating. But you can talk about how each family member experiences the holiday and what you enjoy most about that event. All right, so there are a whole bunch of games out there also that you can use to spark family storytelling. The two that I wanted to mention specifically are Guess Who and Two Truths and a Lie. So Guess Who involves family members anonymously writing down interesting facts about themselves or about different things that they have experienced in their lives. The facts are then going to be read out loud, and everyone has to guess who that fact is about. You can work as a group to figure out the truth, or you can all write down your guesses and then compare at the end and figure out where you were stumped. In the other game, Two Truths and a Lie, each participant comes up with three facts about themselves or their lives, but one is going to be a lie. Other participants have to guess which one is the fib. So this can lead to some really fun conversations about outrageous events that actually happened that maybe you didn't know about in your family. This is a great one for things like family reunions or the holidays, where many family members are all going to be in one location, and there may be a lot of adults who are unfamiliar to the children in the family. So have a notebook or something to write with, and come up with a list of questions that your reporter can ask multiple family members. Then you're going to send them off to collect their responses. This can be a great way for young kids to comfortably engage with adult relatives, giving them a series of prompts and a set goal. In the process, they're going to get a collection of family stories, and they're going to get a greater sense of familial identity. At the end of the activity, you can gather all those answers together and talk about the similarities and the differences. And adult relatives are probably going to be interested to hear about how all of their answers compare, and they'll probably end up engaging in some storytelling as a result. Another fun and creative activity is to create a family crest or a full coat of arms. Crests are symbols that represent a family, like a lion or an eagle or a unicorn, or here we've got a griffin. And a coat of arms usually includes the crest, a shield, a helmet, and a motto. So you can each create one element individually, or you can all work together to create the whole thing. So talk about what symbols would be best for your family, given your family identity or your most important family stories. Are there things that you disagree on? Do you have different ideas about your family identity? Can be a great way to talk about that in one setting. And for families that already have a family crest or a coat of arms, talk about what elements are included and why. How do these illuminate the family story? Now, I don't know about you, but I love a good puzzle, especially this time of year in the winter during the holidays when you have nights that get dark really quick, a lot of time indoors. And for this activity, you're going to gather with your family and pick out your favorite photographs. Talk about the stories behind them, spend some time recollecting your memories of those events. And when you've selected one or a small selection, you can have them made into your own unique family puzzle. And I've given a list here of some of the different companies that you can send your photos off that will turn them into puzzles for you. Working on puzzles helps build patience, concentration, visual spatial skills, and it also improves short-term memory. And you can engage in storytelling while you piece the photos together. Another option is to keep a family memory box. And that's a great way to invite storytelling about past family events using prompts from the items that you collect. So the box is easily accessible. And you want to make sure that every family member feels empowered to put things into the box. So examples of some of the things that you can include are things like notes, postcards that you've received, ticket stubs. If your family likes to go to things like concerts or plays together, you can drop those in the memory box afterwards. Race bibs or medals, if you like run a 5K together as a family, or even things like trophies for kids' sports. Photographs, like school photos, or you can put in the pictures that people send out around the holidays. CDs or videos that include things that you enjoy together as a family. Various trinkets, like I know in my family, a lot of us drink red rose tea, and they used to come with the little figurines in them. So we've got quite a collection spread out across the family, but that would be a good thing to put in a memory box. Or even things like clean wrappers for snacks that the family really enjoys. So on family nights, if you have a family memory box, you can take out the box and reminisce together about the events that are related to those items. You can tell stories about from each person's perspective about that memory or about that experience together. And the last activity we're going to talk about is having family pen pals. So letter writing encourages introspection and reflection, and it lets us process our experiences in a way that benefits both children and adults. It also lets participants across generations connect in a slower and more contemplative way. So when you get together for a reunion or for the holidays, try setting up pen pals for the year or for a month, or maybe just for one letter, whatever it takes to get the ball rolling. You can share details about your day, or you can recount old family experiences. And during it all, you'll enjoy the benefits of storytelling within your own family. So I mentioned that as a non-neuroscientist, I did a bit of studying for some of the information in this presentation. This is just a little bit of it. There's a more complete list in the handout today. And I wanted to include that all the photos here were from Pixabay or Unsplash, and the presentation was put together through Canva. Now, I would love to hear if you have any questions or what activities you've done with your own family, or if you have ideas for activities that will help spark that beneficial storytelling.